Welcome to the Savvy Working Mom podcast. This is the place where we share strategies to help you create a life you love. I'm your host, Whitney, a real-life working mom in the tech industry, professional speaker, and coach. I'm going to help you figure out how to work and mom in a way that brings you joy by using simple systems and through interviews with other working moms who are making it work. Remember that with intentional and daily action, you can live your best days now and forever. Laura Roeder is a lifelong entrepreneur and founder of several multi-million-dollar bootstrap companies. She's also mama to two, a 9-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. She has founded Paperbell, Coach Compare, Meet Edgar, Marie Forleo's B School, and LKR Social Media. Laura is named one of the top 100 entrepreneurs under 30 and has spoken about entrepreneurship at the White House. Laura believes in supporting entrepreneurship around the globe. She has traveled to South Africa as a part of the Virgin Unite's Branson Center of Entrepreneurship, where she offered guidance to budding entrepreneurs, and has spoken to students at the University of Southern California and Loyola Marymount University. Laura, I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I love talking to women who are entrepreneurs because one of the things that I found is the amount of time and energy you have to put into building and growing your own business has some parallels to the time, energy, emotions that go into raising kids. And so to have done both things, I think it's always an interesting conversation about how do you get through all of that. Before we dive into what it's like or was like for you to be building and growing these businesses, as well as having kids, can you tell me a little bit more about your businesses, what they do, and your current project?
Yeah, so my current business is a software company called Paperbell, and we met each other through sort of indirectly through you being a Paperbell customer, which is really cool. So Paperbell is a tool for coaches and consultants to run the whole back office of their business. So their contract signing, their scheduling, payments, client communications, just kind of one place to make it really easy.
Yes, and it's true. I am a client and I really like the product. I think it's extremely helpful for coaches, right? It's clear that it's really designed for people like coaches and consultants. It's more than just a calendar management system. And I do love that. And yeah, we were introduced by one of my friends, Brittany, who also has an episode on the Savvy Working Mom. She is a speaker. She owns her own business and she has 2 kids. She lives in Nashville. You live in London. It sounds like from her, you guys are both entrepreneurs and have been entrepreneurs for a while. So can you talk to me about that journey?
Yeah. So, it was in my bio that I was named Entrepreneur Under 30. That's actually how I met Brittany, through that same, kind of group where we received that award. So I'm 39. I've been running businesses full time since I was, I think, 21. So it's been a long time for me being an entrepreneur. I started out as a freelancer and then I did online courses and then I did software companies. So I've done a lot of different businesses. I've explored a lot of different, types of business and modalities. I've mainly stayed in the bootstrap world. There was one company that I raised a little bit of money for. I absolutely hated raising money. I hated the stress and the pressure of having outside investors. So I was like, not for me, never doing that again.
Awesome. I think that's an interesting thing that you brought up, which is knowing yourself, knowing what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, and really trying to make sure that you focus in and spend your time and energy in places you enjoy. And for you, that's bootstrap, not raising. I think that's really important and probably translates into other areas of your life. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. I think I'm someone that really, really values time freedom and being able to do things at my own pace. And I think that's a much better fit for bootstrapping versus having investment.
And does that translate at all into your personal life, or do you find that mostly in professional life?
Yeah, it definitely translates to my personal life. So if you kind of look at our family from the outside, we're pretty typical in most ways. Like my kids go to the local public school. But then last year we spent 6 months traveling full time around Asia and we pulled our kids out of school and did kind of, world schooling. So I think I'm a little bit of a mix, like with work and with parenting. There's not one style that I subscribe to, but I definitely really value having the freedom to be able to kind of change things up, to choose one little random thing. Like our kids don't do any weekend activities because we really like to travel around the UK. I'm American and I live in the UK. For me, it's really fun to explore here. So just little kind of life decisions like that give us that freedom and flexibility are really important to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I heard two things there that I want to dive into a little bit. One is making that decision to take your kids out of school and give them this world experience. I think in today's world where so many people, even if they're not entrepreneurs, work remotely and have the freedom to work anywhere in the globe, it's something that comes up and you think about, wow, well, wouldn't it be cool to move to Latin America or to bop around Asia for 6 months or 7 months? But the kids are in school, right? And if you're like me in Georgia, our summer is only 2 months. So doing it for the summer almost feels like not long enough, right? So there's a lot of thought that goes into that. And I'd love to talk to you about that. And then I also want to talk to you about making that conscious choice to not put your kids in activities on the weekends, because I think there is a lot of societal pressure for us as moms to have our kids in these activities that really eat up the entire weekend. And it's not always the best choice for every family. So if we could talk about those two things, I think it'd be super interesting to hear your perspective. Let's start with pulling your kids out of school for a world adventure. What thoughts did you have? How did you come to make that decision? And then what were the outcomes? Just talk to me about it.
Yeah. So we have always traveled a lot as a family. When my oldest was 2, we went to Japan for a month. Our kids had been to Thailand for a month, like a good amount of travel around Europe. So it was something we had done a lot of. And we always knew that we wanted to spend some period doing full-time travel while our kids were still, elementary school age. And we kind of had a vague plan for when we wanted to do it. It's one of those things. There's never a good time. Like there's never, a time where it just feels super easy and everything's lined up. So we sort of had a plan, but then we were staying in a rental house and we had bought a house, but we were remodeling it. And basically we had to leave our rental. The house we bought wasn't finished yet. And so we're like, oh, okay, we have 6 months in between houses. Very interesting. And obviously we could have found, some local housing solution, but we're like, okay, I think maybe this is it. I think maybe this is the time to just go. And so it did end up being like fairly last minute. We probably decided about a month before that we were actually going to do it. So when we were traveling, my daughter was 4 and my son was 8. So, he was a totally fluent reader by then. In the UK, she was in what's called reception, which is like sort of a kindergarten pre-K type of thing. And we just felt like it would be a good age for both of them. So like basically she didn't really have much to miss in school because she was so young. And my son was already ahead in school and he loves to read. So it's like, well, okay, he can read books and then he'll be learning. And also it's like when kids are that age, I mean, honestly, I think even if they had learned absolutely nothing for 6 months, academically speaking, I think that would have been absolutely fine, in exchange for all the experiences we got as a family. But it was scary telling the school, it was like kind of scary telling people. And, you get very mixed reactions. Some people think it's very irresponsible, that it's, kids need stability and your kids are going to hate it. Our kids did love it. Our kids just love the novelty of traveling. But, sometimes there's an adjustment period. And it was like, I'm so glad we went. It was an incredible experience. It was incredibly challenging. It definitely wasn't like traveling on Instagram. I'll tell you that much. The way they make it look on Instagram, it was definitely not like that. But it was just like this incredible bonding experience that we had as a family. And my kids were like in sibling boot camp because, there weren't other kids speaking English. Most places that we went, they were together 24/7. They had each other to play with. And it really strengthened their relationship a lot as well.
So what did a typical day or week look like for you? And where did you stay? Were you staying in hotels, Airbnbs? Like where were you actually living?
So we were in most countries for about a month at a time. And then we would usually move about every week to a new spot within that country. And we were in some kind of, apartment or house, or it can be called a part hotel, like something with a kitchen. Basically is kind of the key. Like has to have a kitchen, has to be not just one room that we're all crammed into. And it ended up being actually more of a work sabbatical than we were anticipating. So my husband and I work together. So we run Paper Bell together, but we do have a team of people that keeps it going day to day. So it's not like if we didn't work, the business was going to be abandoned or fall apart. We knew we weren't going to have a nanny with us. So we knew, that, and we didn't do this to park our kids in front of TV all day, right? So we knew that we wouldn't have like a ton of time to work, but we ended up working very little, just kind of checking in on things. And so we spent a lot of time, we would go to some of the local attractions, but we also spent a lot of time just like going to local playgrounds or hanging out at home. We spent a lot of time cooking, a lot of time doing dishes because almost nowhere we stayed had a dishwasher. So I did like more, and our kids did a lot of dishes. Our kids learned how to do a lot of chores. So yeah, it was a mix of like incredible sights and just a huge amount of boring domestic work at the same time.
I love it. Family bonding time.
Yeah.
When it comes to that idea of academics, did you have any type of structure that you put in place, or were you kind of like, hey, we'll read a book when we have the chance? What did that look like?
So my husband had like a big dreams that I was very skeptical of that fell apart immediately. So he was very excited to like buy all these workbooks. And we just found that kind of like trying to like sit down and kind of had structured time was very frustrating for everyone. The kids really needed it to be one-on-one, and we both like didn't really want to do it all day. My husband kind of tried to do it on his own, and he got very torn in two directions and frustrated. So my older one just loves to read. That's just kind of like his main thing that he does for fun. We got him a Kindle. He'll read anything you stick in front of him. So we would, if we're in Korea, we're like putting books on the Kindle about Korea, whatever we can find that's a kid's book that's set in Korea or vaguely about Korea or whatever. So my son was doing some more formal learning, about what was going on around us. And for my daughter, she was just kind of starting to learn her letter sounds. So, we'd read to her and, talk to her about kind of basic math or letter things. But yeah, very quickly there was definitely no structure to the academic side.
Awesome. I mean, that is, like you said, there's so much experience that they get from the learning of being in a new environment and being with their family. It's really interesting to hear how you approach that. So then when you came home, what time in the school year was it? Did you enroll your kids right away, or what did that look like?
So we did time it so that we could come back for the start of the new school year. So we traveled like February to like the end of August, something like that. And then we were back for the new school year to start in September. My daughter had already started school because you start a bit early in the UK. So they had already started school. They were at the same school. And actually in the UK, you keep the same classmates year to year, primary school, which is usually different than the US. So they had the same classmates. So and they're at kind of a smaller school anyway. So they both had a very easy time just kind of sliding back in.
Awesome. I love that. That is such a fun story to hear you guys taking that, I would say like that risk, that chance, that dream that a lot of people have, and meeting someone who's done that and sharing how you did it, I think will be helpful for everyone who's listening. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And then can we talk a little bit about like with that adventure you had, are there any parallels or completely opposite things that happened while you grew your businesses and having kids? Like what was the timing of Paper Bell or your previous business and your two kids?
So the way that I've always started my businesses since becoming a parent has been very unorthodox. So when I launched my first software business, I was actually pregnant when the business launched. So I think the business launched in September and my son was born in January, something like that, just a few months away. And I was very deliberate in making sure I would actually be able to have time off, which I know is not a luxury that everyone has, unfortunately, when they're having a baby. But it wasn't my first company. And I had kind of started it by using the profits from the previous company to roll into it. So basically that meant that we were able to have a small team right from day one. And I actually found that being pregnant was this amazing forcing function for really structuring the business to be able to work without me. So people are like, oh my God, how did you launch a business pregnant? I'm like, everyone should launch a business pregnant. It's great.
I love that. It's so true. Like I found when I went back to work, so, I work in corporate, and after having my son, my first son, when I went back to work, I was so much better at prioritizing and delegating and being very clear on strategically, like this is the direction we're headed, then these are the things that we need to do. And all this other stuff is noise, right? It's really interesting how kids being pregnant, having young children can be that forcing function to actually make you the most productive you've ever been.
Yes, absolutely. It really shines a light on all the kind of dumb, busy work most of us spend time doing. It's like, okay, this is not important, or you don't need to do this, or this does not move the needle go forward. So I definitely found that that was true. I was able to structure the company. I'm like, okay, I need to set up systems. I don't want to launch a company and then it just fall apart 3 months later, right? So I'm going to set up systems so that the business can keep running while I'm on maternity leave and then while I'm part-time. So I've pretty much always been part-time since I had kids. So my son is 9. So that was, 9 years ago that I've had kids and business. I also had businesses before that. But since having kids, I've pretty much been part-time. And again, I found that it's a great forcing function because I'm a big believer that we don't have more than part-time focused work in us every day anyway. Like you can't do high quality focused work for 8 hours a day. You can kind of maybe chat in a meeting or some emails or something. But I do think, most roles, any sort of like online knowledge worker, blah, 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 4 hours a day is like, if you're actually doing focused work for 4 hours, like you can get a lot done. And so that is how I've always run my businesses with a team also, because I think that's another thing is like, I've had people kind of look at my story and be like, oh my God, you've had these, successful bootstrap businesses and part-time and how do you do it all? And it's like, no, my friend, it is not from me doing it all. It's from people doing it together. And I always say that to entrepreneurs, like everything in your business has to be done by someone, not by you. Right? All the things have to be done, but that does not mean you have to do all the things. And entrepreneur or corporate, people who are listening to this who are in corporate but are farther along the ladder, which I imagine a lot of the moms listening are, the great thing is you often do have a team beneath you. You often do have flexibility to maybe spread some tasks around more. But I do think it's something very common for women is this feeling like we have to do it all ourselves. We have to prove ourselves. No one can, do it as good as I can. It's like very common themes, I think, whether you're working or running your own business.
Yes, I agree. So I'm actually writing a book on delegation and there's a talk that I give this year right now on delegation. And delegation is kind of also the same as creating systems, right? Because then you're just delegating to the system the work to get done. And yeah, the reasons that I always hear from people that they, especially women, right? That we can't delegate or that we can't create the right systems in place is because we can't do it. No one can do it like me. And right in that instance, it's like, well, maybe not exactly like you, but can they deliver the outcome that you need?
Right.
And I think sometimes that comes back to, can you actually define the successful outcome? And then that turns into the same with the system, right? Can you define what you need so you can structure and build a system to deliver that? And I think there is that other one that you said. There's 4 reasons that I find people don't delegate. I'll just say them quickly since I brought it up, which is this first one, right? Of nobody can do it like me. The next one is it takes too long to actually delegate the thing. The third one is I've delegated in the past, it didn't work and I was burned. And so I'm never going to do it again. Right. And then the last one is the one that you brought up that I think it just breaks my heart sometimes is this idea that if I delegate this thing, it makes me weak or unworthy or less valuable. It's like you said, the things have to get done, but you don't have to do them all, right? It's a team and it's a collective effort to make sure that the outcomes we need are delivered.
Yeah. And I think, I'm just thinking because of this topic of the podcast, you also see this in parenting so often where it is often women have trouble sharing with their partner some of the duties at home because it can become this cycle where like maybe they start doing things or they're used to doing things in a certain way and their partner does them a different way. And, I've seen it really go off the rails where people get obsessed with like, everything has to be done this way and my partner doesn't do it this way. So I'll just do it myself. And, it takes 2 to tango. I'm not saying, it's just that person's fault or anything, but it is like that same skill at the end of the day of like, okay, yeah, my kids need to get picked up. My kids need to get fed, whatever. My partner does not do those things in the exact same way that I do. But yes, the goal has been achieved.
Yeah. There's more than one way to make spaghetti. That's what I always say.
Exactly.
You just reminded me that I was going to ask you about something and I totally forgot, which is your weekend activities. So you don't have your kids in weekend activities. Can you talk to me about making that choice?
Yeah. So, there's a few things there. One, I am definitely a believer in having a lot of free time for childhood. So, we also don't do a lot of after school activities. We don't do any weekend activities so that my kids just have a lot of free time, so they can play outside or they can read books or, my daughter loves to color, but just making sure that they have time to do what they want to do. I just don't want my kids to just be kind of on someone else's agenda all day, every day, which is really common. And with the caveat, some families have more choices than others, right? I understand that some families, like you just have to have some form of childcare all day because you're working all day. I don't want to be all like high and mighty about this. Like everyone has the choices that they do. But yeah, it's important to me to have that level of freedom so that also they can discover what they like. Like now my son really loves to read about mythology and he's gotten all these mythology books. And first he found Egyptian and then he found like Norse mythology. And it's just to make sure that he has time to find that out about himself, that he's interested in mythology, you know?
Yeah, I think that's great. And one of the things you shared that kind of sparked for me when you said that is I grew up in a very rigid environment. Like I woke up at 5:15. I did chores before I went to school. We walked to school. Like it was just a very rigid environment. And one of the things that I realized when I went to college is I never had the time to be bored, which means I never had the time to kind of explore what it's like to sit and be.
Yeah.
Or to think about what I might like to do, right? Everything was so structured. And so I think there's trade-offs to having these different types of schedules, or maybe you call it lack of schedule. But that just kind of really hit me that, you know, if it would be nice as a kid maybe to just be out there. And that's how we have our kids now. I think that actually is part of maybe why we're raising our kids like we do, where after school, it's like, go run outside and play, learn to entertain yourself.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to provide you something to do every 30 minutes. Go learn to entertain yourself. Cool. Well, before we wrap, I want to ask you one last question, which given the life you live, which is not one that I think is very common, right? Like you said, you are an entrepreneur, you're building businesses. Those businesses are bootstrap businesses. You're working part-time most of the time. You took your kids out of school and went and traveled around Asia, like amazing things. How do you at this point in your life define success?
Oh man, you warned me that you were going to ask me this question. So
I know it's the only one I warn people about because it's a heavy one, right? I think it's something that can be a little bit heavy, but there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just what comes to you. And everybody has a different answer for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, how I would define success is that I enjoy my regular life, is how I think of it. Like there's this Annie Dillard quote that says something along the lines of, you know, our years are of course made up of our days. And it's like, we tend to think of, you know, the vacation we have coming up or the birthday or the whatever, but it's like the vast majority of our life is our everyday boring life. And so to me, being successful is like, am I doing the things that I like, that are fulfilling on just a random day? You know, I'm just absolutely not a believer in like suffering through it to get to the end of the rainbow. You know, sometimes, of course, there's little ways we have to do that temporarily, but I'm not willing to say, oh, I'm going to spend 10 years not enjoying my life so that maybe I can have this financial outcome at the end. Or yeah, for my kids, I don't want my kids to spend 15 years just absolutely stressed and pressured and scheduled to the hilt so that maybe they can get into a better university. It's just like, no, I want for myself and my family for us to just, look at our everyday weekday and be like, yeah, overall, I enjoyed that. That's how I wanted to spend my time.
I love it. So success for you is enjoying each and every day of your life as much as possible.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Laura. And thank you so much for coming on the show. If people want to know more about you, about Paperbell, where to find you, where can they go?
Yeah. So Paperbell is just how it sounds, PAPERBELL.com. And you can find me on Twitter at LKR. That's a really easy one to look up. Or Google my name, Laura Roeder. You could probably spell it wrong. I think it'll still work. And you'll find my blog where I blog about entrepreneurship at lauraroeder.com.
Amazing. We'll put all that in the show notes. So if you're listening and driving, please don't try to write this down. You can go look at the show notes later. Laura, again, thanks for being on the show. It was great having you.
Thank you, Whitney.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Savvy Working Mom podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen in. Also, make sure to link up with us at thesavvyworkingmom.com and on Instagram at thesavvyworkingmom. And please just share this podcast with any other mama who you think might enjoy or benefit from it. Until next time, remember, with intentional and daily action, you can live your best days now and forever.